My name is Tuffy Von Briesen, and I'm the president of the Hill Country region. And I want to welcome all of you to our third Distinguished Speaker Series featuring TJ Campbell from Tire Rack. As I said, this is our third one, and this is going to be our most unique one in that it's not really motorsport oriented, but it deals with something that we're all really interested in. We know you all are interested in tires, especially as they relate to our Porsches, and tonight's DSS should answer a lot of those questions. I want to welcome our fellow PCA members from Lone Star, Maverick, and Longhorn. I also want to welcome our Zone 5 rep, Chuck Bush, Jim Hennig, our PCA National Marketing Director. And in particular, I want to thank Gordy Robbins, Carl Rossi, and Lenny Zwick for putting this together. I know it's been a lot of work, and you guys have really done an outstanding job. Next slide, Gordy. A little bit about TJ. TJ is the Tire Information and Testing Manager for Tire Rack, responsible for Tire Rack's understanding of individual tires and how this information is communicated both internally and externally. Includes all tire-related content on the Tire Rack website and in their advertising. He's also responsible for Tire Rack's tire testing program, which determines which tires are to be tested and the competitor tires they would be compared to. He's Tire Rack's lead test driver. Anytime he wants an assistant, TJ, just let me know.
Okay.
Data derived from the testing program also guides Tire Rack's positioning of the products they carry. TJ joined Tire Rack in 2012 after graduating college with a bachelor's degree in business and small business entrepreneurship. He's held several other job positions in Tire Rack prior to assuming his current responsibilities in 2019. TJ, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So before we begin, I'd like to remind folks that even though we're not together in person, you may still submit a question to TJ during the webinar. If you desire to do this, please use the chat button on the bottom of your screen to access the chat function. Lenny Zwick, our question moderator, will receive your question and figure out the best time during the webinar to ask it on your behalf. Please try to keep the questions technical rather than business in nature. Hi, TJ. Thanks for all of your efforts in helping us put this together. It's been great working with you. So my first question is, could you share with us a summary of Tire Rack's history and current operations?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. So Tire Rack was officially started in 1979. On the slide there, the gentleman standing next to the BMW is Mike Joins. He's our founder. We were started in Indianapolis, and the reason, the inspiration behind starting our company was Mike and his autocross and kind of European car enthusiasts couldn't find the hot autocross tires of the day, and they couldn't find the specialty original equipment tires for their vehicles. And he thought, you know, in a city the size of Indianapolis, if I and my friends can't find these tires, imagine what it's like for people across the country in smaller cities that drive similar vehicles. And so he had this crazy idea to sell tires mail order. As it turned out, with conversation with his partner and financier, he ended up opening a small tire shop down in Indianapolis. But the dream of selling tires mail order never died, and eventually that's what took over, and that led to what we are today. Just some quick important dates. In 1995 is when our tire testing program was started. So it's something that we've been doing for 25 years now. 96, our website was launched. And then 2001, we moved to where we are, actually where I'm sitting right now, where our current test track is. Nationwide, we have over 900 employees. 100 of those are sales specialists, and that's significant because the Tire Rack motto from the very beginning was, if you called in, you got to talk to a tire expert about your tires, and that never stopped. That's still what we do today. So those 100 sales specialists, they are all tire experts. So whoever you talk to, if you call in for sales type reasons, that's what you get. And significantly, going back to Mike's original concern that he couldn't find the OE tires for his vehicles, we have a commitment to stock every original equipment tire for U.S. market vehicles, and of course that includes N-spec tires for Porsches.
So the Tire Rack is the only retail tire sales company that has a tire testing program. How does this benefit both Tire Rack and its customers?
Well, an informed customer is our best customer, in all honesty. You jumped one slide. Go ahead and go back, Gordy. There you go. And market research has shown over and over and over again that buying tires is painful for people. It's for a lot of people, it's a big investment. It's something that you're often stuck with for 2, 3, 5 years. And if you make the wrong decision right there up front, then you're just stuck. And of course, when's the last time any company came out with a product and said, it's just okay, or we really wish it did better at whatever, fill in the blank. No, they don't do that. Everybody says that their newest product is the latest and greatest, the best thing that's ever been there. And without, somebody testing and validating that, consumers don't know. The only thing that they have to go on is, the word of the marketing department for the tire manufacturers. So that allows us to, actually test the tires and determine, separate, just, marketing, bunk from fact. And also it gives our sales team that firsthand experience. It's not just me or our department that's testing these tires. Those 100 or more sales specialists that we talked about on the last slide, they all test drive our tires. So when you call in and you talk to somebody, that person can say, when I drove this tire, this is what I experienced. And that's something it's very powerful. And of course, it's very beneficial for the consumer on the other end of the phone.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
I have a question from the audience, but I'm going to save it for a little later on in the presentation.
Okay. So TJ, could you please share with us a little bit about how your testing program is structured?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart. But I, of course, can't take all the glory. Like I said, it's not just me doing the testing. Our sales team, they are the ones that generate the bulk of the data that you'll see on the website. And if you spend all your time just reading the reports and looking at how we get into the nitty gritty, you might think that we're just all the most technical people out there, but honestly, that's not the case. We do have, club racers, we have, PCA instructors, we have BMW CCA instructors, national level autocrossers. We have those, but then we also have people that maybe they just like cars. Maybe they have a sports car that they like to drive on the street that never gets taken to the track or turns a wheel in anger, so to speak. And we also have people that their car is just a way to get them from A to B. They could be selling basically anything. And so we have these different engagement levels and interest levels, even within our core group of tire testers. And what the result is when they all, rate tires and evaluate them, and they submit their surveys after they're done, and we tabulate all that, it just gives us this beautiful cross section that it's very real world applicable to the market as a whole out there. So it's not just the opinion of Formula One driver Smith over here. It's real world applicable. You go ahead and go on to the next slide, Gordy. The lower left-hand corner picture here is kind of just the aerial view. It shows our test track, which, as you can see, the footprint of the test track is basically the same size or just a little bit smaller than the tire rack building. You know, it's a 10-acre footprint, and that just demonstrates the dedication that our ownership group has to our test program. We use our own vehicles for testing car tires. We have our 4 BMWs, and those are, spec'd identically. They come off the assembly line, very close proximity to one another, and we keep the mileage the same on those vehicles. Anything that one vehicle does, the other 3 need to do it as well. So we keep them as close to the same as possible. So when we have a 4-tire test and our tires drive, or I'm sorry, our sales specialists drive tire A, tire B, tire C, and tire D back to back to back, the only variable is the tire itself, because the vehicles are the same. The route that they drive is the same. The track layout that they drive is the same every time. So it really allows them to discern the differences between products as opposed to trying to determine if it's caused by the change in the vehicle or some other unknown variable. And similarly, we have 3 Audi Q5s that we use when we're testing crossover or SUV tires. And through our test program, it allows our drivers to drive 35 to 40 tires every year, which honestly for average consumers is more than most people will drive in a lifetime. Go to the next. Perfect. So there are 3 main aspects of our testing, and the first, and what honestly is probably the least glamorous, so to speak, the least exciting, but probably the most important, are our real-world road rides. And this is driving on public roads, keeping up with traffic, what drivers are going to experience every day when they're out there in the daily slog. So we have this beautiful, diverse grouping of roads very close in our area that are in different states of disarray. They're made from different materials. We have concrete, we have asphalt, some of it's patched, some of it's smooth, and so it just gives us this huge sample size in a very relatively compact footprint of just 6 miles. That again, this is what our drivers will go out and they will drive caravan style, and they do the loop once in tire A and then again in tire B and C and D. And so once again, it just gives this wonderful back-to-back comparison for our drivers. Go ahead and go to the next one. Perfect, thank you. And then, what everybody wants to know about the glamorous portion of our testing is our track driving. And we have our test track right out in the front yard. It's a 3/10 of a mile track, so our lap is 3/10 of a mile anyway. So it's not a particularly long lap, but it was planned very carefully to quickly discern differences between individual products. And it's easy to learn and easy to master. So once again, our drivers aren't, thinking about learning the track. They know it, after their first season of testing, or for some drivers even less. They know it like the back of their hand. And so once again, they can discern those differences, between tires. There are 4 basic things that we evaluate out there on the track. You can see it's just braking behavior, steering characteristics, cornering, traction, and handling and balance. So it's not, super complicated and not, real nitty gritty. It's just kind of big picture, because the point of our testing, the purpose of our testing is to be as real world applicable as possible. We want our what we generate to be valuable for everyday consumers. So that's kind of the purpose, the ethos behind our testing. And of course, we take lap times, because who's not going to time you can't drive a track without timing it. And that data is published, but I would argue that it's definitely secondary for most tire categories. There are a few that we test that, sure, yeah, the lap time might be the big selling point, but for others, it's just kind of a secondary to the subjective, feelings that we have. In addition, the third prong of our testing is snow and ice for your all-season and your winter tires. Ice testing we perform at a local skating rink, Any all-season, all-terrain, or winter tire that we've tested during the regular year gets tested on the ice sometime November to December. And then in February, we test all of those products in the snow. There's a winter testing facility in Sweden that we use. So they all get shipped over, and it's another week-long bevy of tests. We test acceleration, braking, and there's a handling course that, once again, we take lap times, but more importantly, we get subjective opinion or subjective evaluation on the short snow track that they have over there. And you can go ahead and go to the next. And why, even in Texas, why are all season or winter tires important? Because summer tires have their limitations. They are wonderful at what they do. And, most OE tires, in fact, two of these tires in the pictures are tires that are used as original equipment on Porsche vehicles. And you can think of a summer tire kind of like a candy bar. When it's warm, it's soft and sticky, and that's what you want. You give it, it gives you all that grip. And then at room temperature, it's fine. It's flexible, but it's not super grippy. But then if you put that candy bar in the freezer overnight, what happens when you try to flex it? It shatters. And the tread compound of a summer tire can do that very thing. And that's what you see in these three photos. It's in differing degrees. It doesn't present the same way, but all of these are the same thing. And these are summer tires that were allowed to approach or get below freezing temperatures, and then they were flexed and the compound shattered. That can be due to just inflating, adjusting the inflation pressure in the tire. It can be driving, it can be just rolling it. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen. People drive, summer tires in cold temperatures frequently, especially on Porsche vehicles, because they are that usable sports car, the year-round performance vehicle. And so it happens, people take it out on a cold winter day that's clear and sunny, and they just want to go out and enjoy their car, and that's completely understandable. But if you're in that situation, which, as I understand, a lot of times in Texas, it does get down to freezing. You do get some ice. Consider an all-season tire for those types of conditions, or a dedicated winter tire. Something from the performance winter category would be one. It would give you better traction in near freezing temperatures or at freezing temperatures, particularly if there's any kind of precipitation on the ground whatsoever. If it's rain, if it's snow, of course, but also just their behavior can be better in just cold, dry roads. An all-season or a winter tire is better optimized for those types of situations.
Very interesting. Do we have any questions from the audience yet?
Yes, we do. So George Hansen asks if tire manufacturers contribute tires for testing, or does Tire Rack draw from their own inventory?
That's a very good question. They're drawn from our own inventory. That's something that we are very, very strict about. Some manufacturers sometimes will want to, we really want to get our new Grand Touring all-season tire in this test, but production won't be ramped up and ready to get you a PO until 3 weeks after it's done. Can we send you test tires? And the answer is a hard no. They have to be pulled from our regular stock. It can't be a special shipment of test tires.
Okay, so I have one more, TJ. You've answered most of this question, and you did it in your discussion about cold temperature pressures and the temperature fluctuations in Texas. But the second part of this two-part question is, what exactly do manufacturers mean when they say cold in regards to setting tire pressures?
Sure, and that varies based on the time of year, the ambient conditions. Typically, a good rule of thumb for cold is early morning before the vehicle has been driven. If you leave it outside, preferably before the sun has come up a whole lot, because the sun load will heat up the tires and will alter the pressure. So yeah, the cold inflation recommendation is based on cooled off essentially overnight and hasn't been driven yet.
Great, thanks.
Okay, well, let's see. TJ, could you please explain the trade-offs between various profile tires?
Oh, certainly, certainly. I'm sure everybody, or at least everybody, has a general idea of the way tire sizing works. You know, that 305, 30, 21. The 305 is the width at the sidewalls, not the tread, in millimeters. 30 is the height of the sidewall as a percentage of the width. R means it's a radial tire, and the 21 means that it's a 21-inch wheel diameter. So a lot of people, enthusiasts particularly, of course, because it's always the enthusiasts, think that they want a wider and a lower profile tire because that's the ultimate performance. And it might not necessarily be wrong, but it might not be right either. The shorter sidewall height, that's called the section height of a low profile tire, it will translate, it typically will translate, of course, all other things held the same, which is always a big caveat that I put in whenever I'm talking tires. It's, you know, all other variables held constant. A shorter sidewall height will translate your steering inputs a bit more rapidly. So you'll feel like you have a more responsive tire. That doesn't necessarily mean it has more traction. And another, big myth that I like to bust out there is people think they need to put a wider tire on their vehicle to handle the power, to give them straight line traction. And that's actually not the case. Once again, all things held equally, a wider tire of the same overall diameter actually has a shorter contact patch. It's a wider contact patch, but there's not actually any more rubber in contact with the road. So switching to that wider tire for the rear of your vehicle versus what came on at original equipment doesn't necessarily mean you have a bigger contact patch. And again, all things held constant, a wider contact patch is actually worse for longitudinal traction. So switching to a wider tire potentially or likely will give you worse straight line acceleration and straight line braking traction. So what does it do better? That wider contact patch helps with lateral traction. It helps you when you're handling. And that's why vehicle manufacturers of high horsepower, typically rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive vehicles, that's why they install them on the rear. Aside from the marketing angle that it looks cool, even with a vehicle that's as highly tuned as a Porsche, for example, they are set up to understeer from the factory for safety. No vehicle manufacturer wants, a picture on the news of their vehicle backwards off the road. That's just bad publicity. So if you tune it towards understeer, safe and controllable understeer, you're less likely for your drivers, your vehicle owners, to get into trouble. So that's why a lot of times you'll see these huge staggers between the width of the rear tire versus the width of the front tire, because then around turns, that front tire gives up before the rear tire does. So the vehicle's more likely to push as opposed to the rear tire giving up, and you end up with the unfortunate spin.
So do we have any more questions from the audience?
I do have a question. Someone asked, James Hubbard, if you could quickly compare and contrast ultra high performance summer versus just high performance summer tires, what the difference there might be.
Certainly. High performance summer, honestly, at this point is a little bit of an older and kind of dying category. It was originally based on speed ratings. That's the way a lot of the performance categories in the industry used to be divided, because there wasn't, and in all honesty, still isn't a defined set of criteria for what makes one performance category versus another. So it used to just be typically, H speed rated tires were considered high performance, and then V and greater, which typically V was about as high as it got, back then. Those were ultra high performance summer tires. Nowadays, we typically will see some of your more like vintage style tires will be in high performance summer. But for the most part, anything that is modern is going to be an ultra high performance or greater. So nowadays, an ultra high performance summer tire, in general, of course, you're going to see, better dry traction, better wet traction as compared to a high performance summer tire. And even so, like I said, a lot of the high performance summer tires that are currently on the market are going to be your the tires that are designed for vintage automobiles, in the smaller, narrower sizes.
So I have a question that was submitted earlier, but since you touched on the answer to this question, I'm going to go ahead and submit it now. John Brindley wrote, I have a 1966 911. The period correct tires that are sold by Coker Tire et al. Are these tires designed with current technology methods using the original tread pattern, or just restamped using the original forms?
To be 100% honest, I'm not certain about the products that Coker sells. I believe they buy the original molds, but from anything further than that, I'm not certain. The products that we carry, two come to mind from Vredestein. One is called the Sprint Classic. That is designed for vehicles like your older 911s, old Jaguars, Austin Healey, etc. Those have a vintage look to them in both the tread design and the sidewall design, but they are manufactured using modern materials. They're not the ultimate cutting edge as far as traction goes, because if you have your vintage automobile and you want the period correct look, chances are you have either original or something that is very similar to original suspension on it. And when you throw an incredibly high traction, by today's standards, a high traction tire on a vehicle that has period correct 1960 suspension, a lot of times the results aren't something that's pleasing to the driver. The other that comes to mind, Pirelli has an entire collection of tires they call their collezione tires, that they're products, the CN36, which actually has the identical tread pattern to one of the original Porsche 356 original equipment tires. And those and products similar to that from Pirelli, they use the original plans from their tires. So they're designed with modern materials and manufactured with modern materials, but they are built to the original specs. And that, once again, kind of like I touched on with the previous tire I mentioned, that is to preserve the characteristics, the character, the way that those vintage vehicles drive, because once again, putting a modern tire on it sometimes can ruin it, and they want to preserve that just that aura of the original vehicles.
Okay, that's it for the questions. Let's move on.
Okay, so I have next the perpetual Porsche tire question. You've probably heard it 100 times. So why do Porsches have in-spec ratings? In-spec tires are more expensive. What are Porsche owners gaining by staying with Porsche's tire recommendations?
Certainly, yes, that is a big one. And Porsches are special vehicles, and special vehicles use special tires. Porsches are the everyday supercar. It's designed to do 186 plus comfortably on the Autobahn, and sometimes in wet conditions. But then also it's a daily driver. It's the grocery getter. It's everything. They are just wonderful vehicles, and they were the originators of the branded tire. The homologated tire is what this is actually called, to where the vehicle during its development process, and actually very early in its development process, the tires are decided, and these tires meet Porsche's specifications for that vehicle. Something that's kind of fun. It used to be just N0, N1, N2 denoted the generations of the tire, that specific tire. But now Porsche has moved to a 3-character NSPEC system, to the point that it actually signifies which Porsche vehicle this tire is homologated for. That NA0 that you see in the picture, that specifies that that is a first-generation NSPEC tire specifically for a 911. It doesn't just happen to be a Porsche tire that fits a Boxster, Cayman, and also a 911 or whatever the case may be. You know that that was designed with Porsche's specs for a 911. So it's designed to pair perfectly with your car. And so what kind of differences are there? It could be something small. They could be what's called a common green, which means that tire A and tire B are the same tire before they're placed in the mold. And so just the molds are different. So it could be that the tread pattern changes. For a more performance focused vehicle, maybe let's say a GTS model might have a wider outboard shoulder or less void area, for example. Or if it's a front tire for say a Cayman, and they want a little bit wider void to help with water evacuation. It could be something small like that, but it could be that they're uncommon green tires also, to where the Pirelli P0 that you buy for any vehicle versus the Pirelli P0 that is original equipment on your 911. They might not even be the same tire rolling down the same assembly line. It could have, different tread compound based on or what the manufacturer, what Porsche wants. It could have, multiple compounds across the tread pattern, or it could, the internal construction, the materials used, the belt angle, a million different variables that can be changed to make that tire exactly what Porsche wanted for that vehicle. So like I said, they are very special tires for very special automobiles.
So any additional questions from the audience?
Not at this time.
Okay.
I have some, but let's wait to see if we have a more topical section of our presentation.
Okay. So what limits summer tire service life besides from mileage and exuberant driving, TJ?
Sure. This is a very, I would imagine, relevant question for Texas, for the heat of Texas. And this is, weather cracking or ozone cracking. As the panelists discussed on a previous call, there's a common term for this that we don't use actually because it's not technically accurate. You all know what it is, but you won't hear me say it unless it's, with the word "this does not," affect tires along with it. But anyway, so this is ozone cracking. Tires are designed with detergents, with emollients, with anti-aging substances mixed into the rubber. And those are actually, by weight, the most expensive parts of a tire. And when the vehicle sits for a long time, when the tire sits for a long time, those very expensive components in the tire can't do their job. The way that they work is the flexing of the tire through use distributes those, it circulates those through the rubber. It allows them to get to the surface and work their way through all the pores in the rubber, and that conditions your tires, that keeps them youthful essentially, keeps them from cracking. Things like sun and ozone exposure, acid rain, all of these have a detrimental effect on the rubber. And vehicles that sit, as the quote down there says, or the caption on there says, the Garage Queen tires, even though they don't wear out, even though they may not age out, they might crack and need to be replaced because they're not being used the way that they were intended. So it's just, more reason to get out there and drive your 911, your Cayman, your Macan, whatever the case may be, drive your Porsche the way it was intended to be, because your tires will greatly appreciate it too. And then you won't have to replace them. Well, at least not because of cracking. You might have to replace them because you just wear them out. But if it were up to me, that'd be the way that all tires should go.
So I have two questions that are related. Another question from George Hansen. For Porsches with summer tires that sit in a garage at or below freezing, should the car be jacked up to prevent flat spotting?
If that's realistic for you, then yes, I would highly, highly recommend it. That is the best way to prevent flat spotting. Flat spotting can be temporary to where, you know, just after you drive a little bit and they warm up, it rounds out again. But flat spotting can also be permanent. And so if you have the means, if it's reasonable for you, yes, I would highly recommend jacking up the vehicle. It would be best, honestly, the best way to do it is to take it on a drive, get the tires heated up, and then immediately pull it into the garage, jack it up, take the weight off of the tires, and then that will prevent flat spotting for you. It's the only surefire way to prevent flat spotting.
Okay, Peter Wen has asked if there's any kind of coating that can be put on tires to prevent ozone aging.
We don't recommend any kind of tire dressing, anything like that. It's not regulated in any way, so the manufacturers of those products can make basically any kind of claim they want, because surprise, they're not the ones warranting the tires. They can say, oh yes, this is perfectly safe for tires of all kinds, and then if your tire cracks or deteriorates because you're using it, you don't go to them, you go to the tire manufacturers, who then say, no, we told you not to use any kind of tire dressings on your tires. So there's nothing that we'd recommend using. And in addition, something that people don't think about, when you have a tire dressing on the tire, it's sticky, it collects dirt and grime, and it actually, as the tire flexes during use, it degrades, or it can potentially degrade the outer layer of rubber on the tire. It's like, a very fine layer of sandpaper is being pressed up against the sidewall of your tire for every revolution that it makes, through every cycle of flexing and going back to its relaxed state. So just in general, the best thing that you can do to care for your tires, aside from driving them regularly, to make them clean, is soap and water, soft bristle brush, and just appreciate that natural black satin finish that the tire manufacturers give it.
Great, thanks, TJ.
You're welcome.
So how did Tire Rack's tire sales compare with vehicle sales for different model Porsches?
Well, some of them track pretty true. Just if you sell for every, for example, the Boxster and Cayman are pretty close. The 911 is pretty close, in all honesty. Then other vehicles like the Cayenne, for example, Cayenne is 33%, almost 34% of Porsche sales, but only 23% of Tire Rack's tire sales to Porsche vehicles anyway. And of course, that's, they often are equipped with all-season tires. They're often, driven as the daily driver sort of thing. And then you have, vehicles like the Boxster and the Cayman, and also the 911. What we would expect from vehicles is, that the tire sales don't quite match the vehicle sales, just because you're not replacing tires nearly as often as you're replacing vehicles. But then, the enthusiast drivers, those that, see the track, or you might have a heavy foot, or in the case of 911s, you can see that picture in the upper right-hand corner. That is a 5,000-mile tire that hasn't seen track use. The vehicle was in alignment. It was nothing, that was inherently wrong with the scenario. It was just a driver that had a pretty heavy left foot on a powerful rear-engine rear-wheel drive vehicle. So like the caption says, we love 911s, but it's not just 911s. I mean, our Porsche customers are wonderful customers, from just working with them. And also, I mean, you folks buy a lot of tires, so, we definitely appreciate that.
And any more questions from the audience?
Not at this time. Well, I have some, but let's wait for the later on.
Okay. So how is tire construction for electric vehicles different from internal combustion vehicles?
That one is a very interesting question. And honestly, the tire industry is kind of just catching up. Nobody will admit it, but you know, electric vehicles have been around off and on for 100 years or more, and I think everybody was just kind of waiting to see if this electric vehicle and electric hybrid thing was going to be a fad or if it was actually going to stick around, and it's looking like it's going to stick around. And so now the tire manufacturers are trying to catch up for these unique vehicles. Looking at the chart that Gordy, I appreciate you came up with, the Taycan, it's basically a Cayenne as far as weight goes. It has more torque, and it has the lowest center of gravity of any of the vehicles. And the demands that combination of features places on tires is just unprecedented, in all honesty. So even drivers that don't have a heavy foot, it's so easy to get into the torque because it has 100% of its torque at 1 RPM essentially. So you don't have to be burning away from every stoplight to be placing a lot of stress on the tires every time. They're heavy. They've got that low center of gravity, and a lot of mass from the battery pack situated very low in the vehicle. And so one little bit of inside baseball that I like to share is one of our tire manufacturers has recently told us that they have a tire homologated for an electric vehicle for original equipment, and it needs 300% more lateral rigidity than any tire they've ever built before. And when you have, tires are very highly engineered pieces of equipment. And so when you just get that far outside of, the normal box for what you're manufacturing, it's totally different. And of course, the owners of these vehicles, they still want comfort. They still want it to be quiet. They still want it to last a long time. They want it to be low rolling resistance because you buy an electric vehicle and you pay attention to the range. So it's just this really interesting combination of attributes that often are conflicting, from an engineering standpoint. It's fun. We're waiting for the kind of the next great breakthrough, because necessity being the mother of invention, and we know it's going to come. It's just a matter of when and from whom.
Well, that's very interesting. So we're going to watch that space.
Certainly.
So at this time, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Lenny Zwick. As you've heard, Lenny has been the Q&A moderator. Lenny is an HCR past president, and he will be going over the remaining questions from our members and the webinar audience.
Yeah, so I've got a question from Jonathan Bard, and this question addresses when you get a puncture. Question reads, when I bought a 911 recently, the dealer said that if I get a puncture, I should replace the tire. Is this really true? And if so, why? Isn't the repair material strong enough to keep the tire rolling for thousands of miles? His 911 has Pirelli P0s.
Well, in normal situations for more pedestrian tires, for more pedestrian vehicles, yes, that is the case. As long as it's within the repairable area and it's of an appropriate size to be repaired, then yes, a proper plug and patch, which there should always be both a plug and patch. You shouldn't just plug it from the outside, shouldn't just patch it from the inside. But yes, a proper plug and patch can last the remainder of the life of the tire. And in fact, the U.S. Tire Manufacturers Association, which is kind of we'll call it the governing body. That's not quite accurate, but we'll call it the governing body for tires. They say that a proper repair doesn't even negate the speed rating on a tire. So if it was, 186 mile an hour tire before the repair, they say it still is after the repair. But tire manufacturers and vehicle manufacturers can kind of go against that and say, yes, that's true for tires in general, but we have specific requirements for ours. And your P0s on your 911, Pirelli says that any of their high speed rated tires are non-repairable. So Pirelli specifically says do not repair. And Porsche also says that that their tires are not intended to be repaired. So you're kind of 0 for 2 on that one, unfortunately, because of the situation for the vehicle and the tires that you have.
Okay, so I have another question from Matt Voss, who owns a 2003 996 Turbo. Nice car, Matt. He's having trouble finding replacement tires for that car. There's some older design PS2s or some unrated Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 connects. He also sees Yokohamas and Advan Sports, and he's got a question regarding if you had a recommendation for spirited hill country driving and maybe 1 or 2 days of driver's ed, since the current Michelin PS4S Pro P0s aren't available to him in 18-inch diameters.
Yep, that rear tire size is a difficult fitment, and it severely limits your options, unfortunately. So that's a very common situation that people run into. One thing that I find myself repeating a lot, that I tell people a lot, is your tires like your PS2, the PS4S, the P0, the Continental Extreme Contact Sport, the Yokohama Advan Apex, tires that we Tire Rack would classify as max performance summer tires. They are very good dry performers. They are capable of some very fast lap times, but they are not track tires. That's not part of their original design, is not to be used on the track. And sure, you'll see tire manufacturers have product launches where, you know, dealers are out on the track driving exotic cars on their tires. And typically they go through multiple sets of those every day. If you just do a couple DEs a year, and you know, you're not necessarily pushing it 100% to the limit, you're not getting much understeer through turns, they would probably survive that type of use, but I can't guarantee it. We get a lot of concerns from consumers because these high performance vehicles come with these high performance tires, and consumers will take them out on track, and they don't understand why they destroy particularly the outboard shoulder of the front tires. Is notoriously 99% of the time that's what it is, and it's because a street vehicle on street tires being used on track is going to be compromised in some way. So sorry, that's my very long disclaimer before I get into actually answering your question. Yes, the PS2 is a very good tire. I think they're on the N3 specification at this point. So even though it is, the PS2 is an older design, they are continually evolving it through the N specs. It's a nice tire to drive daily. It's track capable again, and it should probably get you pretty good life. That Pilot Sport Cup 2 Connect 240, the big unknown with that one is how long it's going to last for drivers. That tire was just released, as you've seen in the slides. 911s, particularly rear fitments, are notorious for wearing out tires very, very quickly. So honestly, I'm sorry, I can't give you an estimate of how many miles I would expect you to get on that. But I can say it would definitely be the best of your options on the track, or with that, or the Yokohama Advan AO52 would also be a very good option on the track. And I would assume, probably 5,000 to 10,000 miles on the rear on either of those. But like I said, I can't, I can't promise you that it will provide the life that you hope to get out of those either. So you're compromised either way, I guess is the moral of the story. You're either going to be compromised for track use, or you're going to be compromised for street use, unless you have dedicated track and street setups. And I'm sorry that I can't give you a better answer.
Yep. Thanks, TJ.
You're welcome.
So I have a question from Alex Suarez that's related to the puncture discussion we just had. The question reads, so does Tire Rack's road hazard warranty cover replacement for a puncture that on more pedestrian tires or cars would be expected to be plugged or patched?
Yes, it does. We actually work that into the contract with our road hazard provider for tire manufacturers that specifically have stipulations on tires that can't be repaired, or for vehicle manufacturers. We made sure to cover that because we don't want to be telling people, oh no, you just go ahead and repair this when either the tire or the vehicle manufacturer said it needed to be replaced. And we also don't want our consumers to be stuck in that situation. So yes, that's something that we worked into the contract with our road hazard provider.
Okay, I have one question here. Let me see if I could find it in my list. That really had to do with what happens to tire pressures when you're on track. The question reads, I have heard that optimal tire pressure increase for adhesion and braking while racing is a 10 to 15% increase over cold pressure. Is this accurate?
That's also something that we are asked about a lot. Everybody that uses their vehicle on track wants to know what the ideal tire pressure is for them. And that's another, unfortunately, is how I'm going to start the answer. There is no, this vehicle with this setup, suspension alignment, this tire should run this pressure. The air pressure to grip curve for a tire is an inverse, or I'm sorry, is a bell curve. So there's one pressure right at the top of that bell that gives you the most traction, and then anything above or below that, you're losing traction. And the conventional wisdom is, if you're searching for grip, you go down in air pressure, and that's not always accurate either. A lot of times, if you go down in pressure, sure, you get a larger contact patch, but the contact patch is less supported, and so it can begin to buckle in the middle, especially under high stress use like on track. So there's no guarantees that going down in pressure is going to give you more traction. But one thing that it will guarantee is less pressure means the inside of your tire itself is not supported as well. The tire is more likely to roll under heavy turns. It's not supporting the loads that are being asked of it as well. And you're more likely to destroy your tires when you're searching for grip going down. So that 10 to 15% increase over cold actually is a very good recommendation. So if you have, if your standard pressure is, 32 PSI, go 35 to 38 when you're starting out on track. And one, you might find that you actually have more traction, but you're also less likely to ruin your day because you ended up destroying, again, particularly your front tires, because you were searching for traction and dropping pressure. And then, of course, adjust in small increments afterward.
Okay, I have another question from Adrian Silva, who's curious about Porsche's tire pressure recommendations for 20-inch wheels, and they happen to be 34-44. He thinks that they seem fairly high, and he'd like to know your opinion.
I mean, my opinion is always going to be to go with the vehicle manufacturer's pressure recommendations. The pressure can be adjusted, the vehicle manufacturer can use pressure in the tire to carry the load of the vehicle, which is the tire's primary duty, primary goal. Its main purpose is to carry the load. And of course, it's the air inside the tire that's actually carrying the load of the vehicle. They can also use it for handling reasons, for high-speed stability, for impact and puncture resistance, or for rolling resistance and fuel economy. So Porsche specs the air pressures that they do for a reason. They don't tell us. We have no idea what it is. But I would never recommend for any vehicle running lower than placard pressure.
Okay, so Tuffy wants to know if you should use a combination of pressures and tire temps for optimum traction. The question is really related to track use.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Should you use a combination of pressures and tire temperatures for optimum traction? And it's related to track usage.
Certainly, you bet. Um, Coming off track and immediately off track, so preferably no cool down laps, just come off at speed and stop. And the first thing that you should do when you're checking for these kinds of things is, of course, using a probe type pyrometer. Don't use the infrared gun, because that just measures surface temperature, which changes nearly instantaneously, in all honesty. So don't use an infrared. Use a probe. Get down below the surface layer of the rubber, and make sure that you use the exact same measuring method every time. But yes, measure across the face of all of your tires, outside, middle, inside, and using that temperature spread, or observing that temperature spread, will tell you where the work is being done. Work equals heat equals wear. So wherever the tire is doing the most work is going to have the highest temperature and also the most wear. And so ideally you want to be using the full contact batch for all 4 tires, based on vehicle limitations, driving style. Of course, that's not always realistic, but certainly that is the ideal setup, is to have even temperatures all the way across. And yes, adjusting your air pressure in your tires is one of the many tuning tools that you have at your disposal to help regulate and even out that pressure. When your pressures are too low, you're often going to see just the outboard, inch or so of your tire is very, very hot. It has a lot of wear, and sometimes you will even see down to the sidewall. There's abrasion on the sidewall from the tire rolling under, and that reminds me another soapbox moment for me. The little triangles on the sidewalls of the tire, they're not there to show you where you should be wearing your tires. Those are to tell you where the wear bars are, and nothing else. So don't use those as your guideline for, I'm not rubbing off the tips of the triangle, so I have a good setup. That's a misconception that's out there that is not true.
All right, let's see if we have time for one more question. And the question is, how concerned should I be about a local shop mounting new tires and damaging my expensive wheels? I think we all face that concern.
Yep, and it depends on the shop, of course. If they have the newest and latest equipment, then chances are they are willing to invest the money and therefore the time and sometimes the training. So I would kind of be inclined to say that that's a good indication, but also you could have, the shop that's been doing it for, 50 years and been doing it the same way, and they could be, the best of the best. So everybody makes mistakes, in all honesty. I mean, we've had, consumers call in because their dealership damaged it. We've had consumers call in, honestly, because Tire Rack damaged their tires. It is a concern, especially on wider wheels with, really short section height, stiff tires like we see on a lot of Porsche vehicles. I guess my recommendation would be, potentially take pictures of your wheels before you go in, do a before and after just to make sure, protect yourself. But it is a concern because, people are fallible. Humans make mistakes.
Great suggestion. Okay, I think we've managed to address all the questions that have been submitted, so that's great.
I got one more. This is a highly technical question, TJ.
Uh-oh.
So I was saving it for last. So one of the things that I'm most concerned about is when I go into the Costco parking lot, people steal my Porsche valve stem covers. What can I do for that?
Buy spares, Gordy. Weld them in place, but then
Yeah.
you can't check your pressures every month if you do that. So, yep. Unfortunately, I don't have a solution for that one, my friend.
Well, we're going to have you back when you have one. How's that sound?
Okay.
I have one more. One just came in, and it looks like it can be answered pretty quickly. Is there a way to get a comprehensive list of tire racks test results?
Sadly, no. You can find the results for any tire that we've tested on our website. I'm sorry, there's a heading at the top that says Learn. If you hover over that, it'll drop down and it will say Test Results, and you click on that and it will take you to where you can select by tire brand and then model, or you can select by performance category, so you can view any tests that we've performed. We quasi intentionally don't have a full comprehensive list, because anytime you have a comprehensive list of anything, that encourages comparison between the items in that list. And something that I was talking with my fellow panelists about earlier today is our tests. We go to very great lengths to control variables as best we can within that single test. But when we test, 4 summer tires in May of 2019 and then 4 summer tires in June of 2020, those tests are not considered comparable. Those results aren't considered comparable. So you can be very confident in the results of the 4 tires, within a single test, but please resist the urge, because it's there, it's real. Resist the urge to try to compare test A and test B and say, oh, this tire ran this fast in this test and this tire ran this fast in this test, so that automatically means this one's faster. Please, resist that urge, like I said.
Great. Okay, that's all the questions, I think.
Okay. Oh, here's a question slide.
Hey.
Hey. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, and thank you all very much. I appreciate all of the panelists that have done so much work. Hill Country Region, all of Zone 5. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate all the great questions that we've had, and thank you so much for your interest in what we do here at the Tire Rack.
And thank you for you spent a lot of time working with us, so we appreciate the time you've taken.
TJ, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you. I've been involved in these DSSs since we started, and this is probably one of the most informative and interesting presentations that I've heard. Thanks really very, very much. Thanks again to all of you for calling in. We're going to have some more of these in the future. And also want to say thank you for supporting Tire Rack Street Survival Program. Lenny's got a lot of experience with that. We're kind of down right now because of COVID, but we'll get back with it. We've got a pretty active program here in Hill Country. Again, I want to thank Gordy and Lenny and Carl for doing such a good job on this. And with that, good night, everybody.
Okay, good night, TJ. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, TJ. It was great working with you.
You too, Gordy. You too.
Take care, folks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
TJ. See ya.
Bye, everybody.